Okay, so I've been promoting my FIRE checklist for a while, and I just want to make sure you guys know I'm not making any money from this. And I don't sell any courses like many YouTubers do, but I believe this is the complete formula that I'm going to continue to follow to achieve financial independence and retire early by age 45. And if you want to become financially independent, you need to learn to prioritize your personal finances. And when I started my YouTube channel last year, my purpose of creating content is to educate people on personal finances like budgeting, investing, and paying off their debt, and to tell you terrible dad jokes on that small whiteboard back there. In 2014, I was in $110,000 in personal loans, car loans, and credit card debt, and I cleaned up my mess and started learning about investing for financial independence in 2016. Now we have saved over 7 figures in assets, and we're saving over 65% of our gross income towards early retirement. We're consistently saving and investing to achieve that FIRE at $3.7 million so we can retire early at age 45. If you go to my website at firesidechat.com/contact, the only thing you have to fill out is your nickname, and it doesn't even have to be your real name. You put your email, your phone number is optional. Tell me what type of content you like to watch, and if you're interested in signing up for the free financial coaching session with me, the only reward that I get when you submit your information is that you get added to my newsletter subscription, and it's a weekly newsletter that's going to benefit you about financial education like this one from last week. And I would never spam you because I hate spam emails too. And it's 100% about building your financial knowledge in the stock market, money saving tips, and the overall economy. You're going to get free access to my Google Drive where you can download the spreadsheets I've been using for years to calculate your annual compound interest, F.I.R.E calculator, F.I.R.E calculator, TSP calculator, and so many other files. Being disciplined and patient allow me to save over $1 million in total assets. And you can check out this video about how ordinary people can become self-made millionaires, and I will put that video in the description below. If you're brand new to my channel, my name is Sai and welcome. So you're watching part 1 of the 2-part video series to dive deep into my FIRE checklist and how you can achieve financial independence and retire early. Now, let's talk about the expanded FIRE checklist. And the very first step is to calculate your FIRE number. And this is by far the most important step to get your FIRE started, because for one, your budget will change based on inflation, significant life events, and maybe moving to a new location. And you want to typically break down your expenses into essential, non-essential, and large annual expenses. And I typically break down the essential expenses into the following 5 categories: housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, and insurance. The next category will be your non-essential expenses like subscriptions, dining out, entertainment, celebrations, travel, and more. It's really important to categorize the differences between your needs and wants. And another category most people forget to do is to budget for their large annual expenses. And some examples are your quarterly or semi-annual vehicle maintenance, DMV registration fees, car insurance, annual subscriptions, or anything else that will cost you over $200 for a one-time charge. An example would be to multiply your total expenses by 25 years, and that will give you the FIRE number that you want to be invested in. I also multiply the total annual expenses by 3, and that's the 3 years of emergency fund and cash or bonds we want to have in case of a bear market like you're seeing in 2022. You need to go back to step 1 and calculate your FIRE number at least once a year to adjust for inflation. What my wife and I do is go to our budget spreadsheet and figure out what our total annual expenses are at the end of every year. And the personalized budget is only created for private clients, and you can visit my website at firesidechat.com/coaching if that's something you're interested in signing up. Step 2 of the FIRE checklist is to save for your emergency fund, but only up to your deductibles. And this step is more about saving for your rainy day fund, not saving 3 to 6 months of your expenses in case of unemployment. A rainy day fund should only be used when it's unexpected and urgently necessary. It's when you need the cash right away to, let's say you have a blown tire and you need $200 to buy and replace a new tire. And you should also ask yourselves, How much would it cost you to fly home in case of a family emergency? When my grandparents recently passed away 8 months apart from each other, I had the rainy day fund to cover my flights. How much would you need to pay out of your own expenses or your own pocket for the insurance deductible after you get into a car accident? A typical car insurance deductible is about $500 for each claim you make with your car insurance. How much money would you need to set aside for a medical emergency? The average medical deductible depends on your coverage, and if you have serious health issues and you have frequent doctor's visit, then you might need to boost your rainy day fund. And as far as where to park your rainy day fund, you should keep your fund completely separate from your primary checking account. You can find a high yield savings account that can pay you at least 1 to 2% in APY. I wouldn't worry about inflation for the rainy day fund because you need to treat it like a piggy bank that you're only gonna break when poop hits the fan. And I also wouldn't invest or park it in a CD because you need to be able to access this cash when something unexpected and necessary happens to you. I've personally had Ally Bank for several years now, and they have the buckets inside a savings account where you can dedicate parts of your savings to certain expenses. You can also check out Synchrony, SoFi, and Markets by Goldman Sachs, and I am not sponsored by any of these companies or banks. Once you complete step 2, but something unexpected and necessary came up and you had to take cash out of the rainy day fund, you need to pause step 3 and come back to this step to make sure you have enough cash in your rainy day fund before going back to step 3 again. So for example, if you used $500 for car insurance deductible and you're on step 3 or 4 of the FIRE checklist, you need to pause the steps and save $500 again. The typical amount I see from this step is anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000. But again, it depends on your total deductibles and how many people you have in your household. Step 3 of the FIRE checklist is to invest your retirement up to the employer match. And if your employer doesn't offer any match, then you can skip the step and move on to step 4. And according to CNBC, 62% of US employers offer some type of employer match, and having an employer match is basically getting a bonus from your employer. And here are some additional steps you should take to maximize your free money from your employer in 401k, 403b, and TSP. And the employer match also usually comes with the vesting schedule for retainability purposes. You should check with your employer, but I've seen anywhere between 3 and 5 years before you're fully vested. You also need to check to see how much you personally need to contribute to the 401k in order to get the employer match. And the most common matching formula is 50 cents for every dollar contributed by the employee up to 6% of pay. And TSP offers dollar for dollar matching if you contribute 5% of your salary. For example, if you contribute 6% of your $100,000 salary to your 401k, then it's $6,000 every year, right? If the employer matches 50 cents for each dollar you contribute up to 6% of your salary, then you get $3,000 in employer match. And if you get the dollar for dollar match like the TSP with a 5% contribution, then you get another 5% employer contribution of your salary to your retirement. Again, it's free money you should never leave on the table. You should keep in mind that your employer match is in pre-tax dollars and you will pay taxes on them when you retire. However, having the employer match could help your portfolio get even bigger in the long term. For example, if your employer match is consistently, which is very unlikely, at $3,000 a year with a 10% average annual rate of return for the next 20 years, your employer gave you a total of $60,000 and accrue $129,000 in earnings and interest. And you're gonna have roughly $190,000 just from the employer match in 20 years. If you decide to just leave it where it is and let it grow for another 20 years, the employer contribution alone could grow to $1.3 million in 40 years with a total interest of $1.2 million. Now that's the power of compound interest. And step 4 of the FIRE checklist is to pay off your debt except for the mortgage. You have 2 approaches to tackling your debt. You can use the avalanche method or the snowball method. And with the avalanche method, you list your debt from highest interest rates to the lowest interest rates, regardless of the balance. With the snowball method, you list your debt from the smallest balance to the highest balance, regardless of the interest rates. Here's an example of the avalanche method. Let's say you have $15,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest rate and $10,000 in car loan at 4% interest rate, and you have $20,000 in student loan at 7% interest rate. If you're using the avalanche method, you pay off your debt in this order, and your credit card debt with a 20% interest rate, student loan with 7%, and then your car loan at 4%. You can pay off your debt faster this way because you're tackling the highest interest rates first. And if you're using a snowball method to pay off your debt, then you pay off your debt in this order: $10,000 in car loan, $15,000 in credit card debt, and then $20,000 in student loan. When you tackle your debt from the smallest to the largest balance, you're psychologically feeling more accomplished by eliminating one debt at a time. You're going to feel even more motivated to tackle one debt after another. And when I tackle my $110,000 in consumer debt, one of the first steps I took was to significantly reduce my expenses. And I had zero discretionary expenses because I wanted to become debt free. And now, not every one of you has insane debt as I had, but getting rid of the $500 car payment and using that to invest towards early retirement will be much more rewarding. And if you don't have enough cash flow to tackle your debt right now, then you have to find a way to increase your income. And when I was paying off my debt, I had several jobs to eliminate one credit card at a time. You can check out this video about how I paid off $47,000 in credit card debt, making $58,000 a year in 2 years, and I will link that video in the description below. The whole point of tackling your debt in this step is to increase your savings rate. And according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the average personal savings rate as of May 2022 in the US is 5.4%. And this is income left over after people spend money and pay taxes. And if you truly want to achieve financial independence and retire early, you have to increase your savings rate from the average to 40%, 50%, or even 60%. And you can't achieve that if you have a $500 car payment, $300 student loan payment, or carrying credit card balances month over month with a 20% interest rate. And saving for your future requires you to get out of debt, stay out of debt, and stay disciplined. Your savings rate will always trump your overall investment returns. And step 5 of the FIRE checklist is to max out your emergency fund by saving 3 to 6 months of expenses on top of your rainy day fund. And you already have $1,000 to $2,000 saved from step 2 for your rainy day fund up to your deductibles. And I would just make sure that you have the cash still available for the criteria I mentioned in step 2. When you calculate how much you need to save for your emergency fund, you need to look back at step 1 of the FIRE checklist, and which is to calculate your FIRE number. The only expenses you should calculate are your housing that will keep a roof over your head, utilities that will keep your house running, groceries to keep you and your family fed, transportation to allow you to travel from point A to point B, and insurance like the medical, vehicle, and life that will minimize your exposure to the unknown risks. If you have any additional products and services that you cannot live without, you will list them here. And once you figure out how much it costs to cover 1 month of expenses, the rest is easy for you to calculate. In your primary checking account, I would recommend keeping 1 month of expenses at all times. The reason is most people get paid on a bi-weekly basis and your bills don't necessarily align with your paychecks. And keeping your checking account above water by keeping 1 month of expenses saved will prevent you from paying overdraft fees or going into a negative balance. The rest of your emergency expenses will go into the same high yield savings account where you have your rainy day fund from step 2 of the FIRE checklist. And the whole idea of step 5 is to cover your butt in case of a recession that leads to a higher unemployment rate. You want to have typically anywhere between 3 and 6 months of additional expenses in the high yield savings account, not counting the one you already have in your checking account. The basic rule of thumb is if you're the sole provider for your household, you want to have at least 6 months of expenses saved in case of unemployment. If you're in a dual income household, your spouse makes enough income to cover expenses in case you become unemployed, then I suggest saving at least 3 months of expenses. If you have any upcoming significant life events like getting married, getting a divorce, having a child, or adopting a child, changing your career, moving from one location to another, separating from the military service, or experiencing serious illness or disability, then I would recommend boosting your emergency fund that can cover any large upcoming expenses. Step 6 of the FIRE checklist is to max out your contributions to your Roth IRA and HSA. Let me first talk about the Roth IRA. You can either contribute directly to the Roth IRA or do a backdoor Roth IRA, and it depends on your annual income. And if you're under the income threshold set by the IRS, then you can directly contribute to your Roth IRA from your checking account. And if you're above the income threshold, then you can do what's called a backdoor Roth IRA by opening both traditional IRA and Roth IRA, and I will link those videos in the description below. You should understand the differences between the two and how they will affect your taxes for the year. The Roth IRA is your core retirement account. Your 401k or TSP is only active as long as you're employed with that company, and your Roth IRA is yours to manage for the rest of your life, and you have the option to roll your 401k or TSP retirement accounts to traditional and Roth IRAs if that's what you choose to do. What you directly contribute to the Roth IRA is already tax-free and penalty-free. You can take out your contributions at any time. The earnings and interest are what you need to wait until you're 59.5 to withdraw from your Roth IRA. If you converted any money from your traditional IRA, then you'll need to wait a minimum of 5 years to withdraw from your Roth IRA. I would highly recommend keeping a detailed record of your contributions and conversions so you can separate the two. With the Roth IRA, you have several investment options. I can't personally tell you what to invest, but here are the most common investments you'll find. You can keep everything in cash inside your Roth IRA, or invest in actively managed mutual funds, index funds, ETFs, individual stocks, or bonds. And if you want to go with the lazy route, there are always the target date retirement funds based on your retirement age. Investing in your Roth IRA is a crucial component of your financial independence journey, and your Social Security retirement is most likely not going to cover your entire retirement expenses. And having your money grow tax-free could significantly reduce your taxable income in the future. And just by maximizing your contribution to your Roth IRA, every year starting at age 30 with a 10% average annual rate of return, you're looking at over $2 million invested tax-free by the time you turn 60 years old. And if you're married, you can contribute in 2 separate Roth IRAs, and you could possibly have double the investments by the time you retire. And I strongly encourage you to check out this video about how to become a tax-free millionaire with a Roth IRA, and I will put that video link in the description below. And the next one is maximizing your HSA or health savings account. And not everyone is eligible to contribute to the HSA if you don't have the correct healthcare plan. And HSA is another important part of the FIRE journey because not only it can help you with your medical, dental, and vision expenses, but it can also become a part of your retirement income. What you probably didn't know is that you can actually invest money inside your HSA into a mutual fund. And there are no income limits to having an HSA. However, you need to meet the following criteria to open one. You cannot be enrolled in Medicare or TRICARE, be claimed as a dependent, and you have to meet the minimum deductible for an individual high deductible health plan or the family HDHP. You should check with your employer to find out if they have the HDHP available to you as an employee. The HSA is a triple tax advantage account to allow you to contribute in pre-tax dollars, which lowers your taxable income. And don't get this confused with an FSA because that's a spending account. The best way to do this is to work with your employer's HR to have your paycheck deducted so you can decrease your taxes, instead of waiting around until the following year when you file your taxes with the IRS. Also keep in mind that your employer could give you the match to your HSA, and unlike the 401k, the employer match will count towards your personal contribution limit, so you need to be careful with that. For example, if your contribution limit is $7,500 and your employer contributes $500, then your contribution limit is $7,000 for the year. The HSA can also grow your investments tax-free. And I'm going to use my Optum Bank as an example here, but you should look at your own HSA and find out what investment options they have available to you. I have all kinds of mutual funds that are available to me with my HSA, and I can do the target date retirement fund with Schwab, Vanguard index funds with like the S&P 500, REITs, and small cap and medium cap mutual funds. And I'm not going to tell you what to invest, but having a 10% average annual rate of return for an individual HSA fund starting at age 30 for the next 20 years is $300,000. And even if you stop contributing after 20 years, your HSA could grow to almost $1.3 million by the time you turn 65. The average medical cost for retirees per couple is about $300,000 throughout their retirement in the US. If you have the family HSA, then you could have over $500,000 in 20 years and almost $2.4 million by the time you turn 65. The other advantage that HSA has is it allows you to withdraw from it tax-free if you can provide medical, dental, and vision receipts. And there's no deadline on these receipts, so you can get a medical treatment today in 2022 and then reimburse yourself 20 years from now in the year 2042. It's completely up to you. When you turn 65, however, you can withdraw from your HSA without providing any proof of medical expenses, and you would just have to pay the income taxes that are applicable to you, and the 20% penalty tax is completely waived. I strongly encourage you to check out this video about the HSA, and I will put the video link in the description below. Step 7 of the FIRE checklist is to max out your employee retirement contribution, and I'll break it down between two scenarios: self-employed and employed. If you're employed, then the most common retirement account is the 401k in the private sector, TSP for federal employees and members of the armed forces, 403b for public school teachers or other nonprofit organizations, and 457b for state and local government employees. Now, your employer's retirement plan isn't structured the same as everyone else's, but I'm going to give you broader information on what you're supposed to do on this step. The first thing you need to figure out is if your employer's retirement plan offers the Roth option. And if they do, then you need to decide whether you want to contribute to Roth or traditional. And with the Roth account, you're contributing your after-tax money or the money you already pay taxes on. Because you already pay taxes up front, you can withdraw it tax-free once you're eligible to withdraw from your retirement account. With the traditional account, you're contributing your gross income or the money before it gets taxed, which means it will lower your taxable income. Using the traditional route means you're going to pay taxes later when you're eligible to withdraw from your retirement account. And the next thing you need to know is what the limit is for your personal contribution. Your contribution limit begins on January 1st and then ends on December 31st. For the year 2022, the contribution limit is $20,500, and if you're age 50 or older, it's $26,000. And the contribution limit will increase over the years to adjust for inflation set by the IRS. If your employer gives you a match like I talked about in step 2 of the FIRE checklist, that employer match does not count towards your personal contribution. So if you contribute $20,500 for the year and your employer contributes $5,000, then you're contributing a total of $25,500 for the entire year. However, the total contributions between an employee and the employer cannot exceed $61,000 for the year 2022 or $67,500 for 50 or older. Your investment options may be limited inside your 401k, 403b, 457, and TSP. You can always be more hands-off by choosing the target date retirement funds, or what I call invest and forget. What you really want to look for inside your 401k, and this is not any specific investment advice, is to look for the 5 and 10-year historical returns and the expense ratio, which is the cost to hold an investment fund for a year, and they charge you a certain percentage of the money invested in the fund. You probably would want to invest in something that's giving you a 5 to 6% return, and the fund charges you a 1% in expense ratio, right? You should assess your risk tolerance and financial goals to know how much you want to be exposed to stocks versus bonds. And I've made several videos about the 401k investment options, and I will link those videos in the description below. If you're self-employed, you have several retirement options. You can do what's called a solo 401k, which allows you to contribute as the employee and the employer and gives you a higher limit than other retirement plans. You can also set up a SEP IRA, which stands for Simplified Employee Pension for sole proprietors. And this plan is only for employer and not for employees. You can contribute up to 25% of your net earnings and not exceed the annual contribution limit. And if you're running a very profitable one-person business, then the SEP IRA might be the right one for you. And you can also do a simple IRA, which is the same thing as SEP IRA, but with a lower contribution limit. Make sure to explore all of your self-employed retirement options and the tax benefits before you start contributing to one. Step 8 of the FIRE checklist is to achieve at least 50% of your savings rate. And by the time you reach this step, you're already maxing out your Roth IRA, HSA, and 401k, right? If all of the combined is not quite 50% of your income, then you want to consider opening additional accounts to get to your 50% savings rate. The easiest way to calculate your savings rate is by using your gross income, not your take-home income. And for example, if you make $150,000 a year in gross income and you're saving $75,000 a year, then that's a 50% savings rate. Simple, right? The take-home income is much harder to calculate because you don't really know how much you're paying in taxes until you file your taxes in April. And achieving a 50% savings rate of your gross income is much more challenging than the net income. Here are some tips to save half of your income. And if you're in a dual income household, try to save one income and spend the other one. You can also open FSAs or flexible spending accounts that could lower your taxable income. The common ones are the Healthcare FSA, Dependent Care FSA, and the Limited Purpose Healthcare FSA. You can check out that FSA video linked in the description below. If you have children, then consider opening a 529 plan to save for their K-12 or college expenses. You can also gift your children by opening UTMA or UTMA or UGMA UGMA accounts. You can also open an additional investment account or the taxable brokerage account. There's a long list of stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds that you can invest in your taxable brokerage account. A lot of people on the FIRE journey just choose to invest in index funds like the S&P 500 to keep things simple in their investment accounts. Even if you have a higher risk tolerance, you should still be careful not to put all your eggs in the same basket. You should look at the long-term outlook of your investment portfolio. How much is $20,000 a year with a 10% average annual rate of return going to give you in 20 years? And what types of investments get you an average of 10% return? My wife and I have 2 taxable brokerage accounts. One account tracks dividend investing and the other account tracks growth investing. You can check out my dividend investing video linked in the description below. If you have a high income like $250,000 or $300,000 a year and your employer offers what's called an after-tax employee contribution to your 401k, then you could do what's called a mega backdoor Roth. For example, if you're 40 years old making $300,000 a year in gross income, you max out your retirement contribution at $20,500 and your employer contributes, let's say, $7,000 a year in your 401k. For the year 2022, since your maximum contribution to your 401k is $61,000, then you would have $33,500 left to contribute as a mega backdoor Roth. You just need to make sure that your 401k plan has the in-plan rollovers to a Roth 401k or in-service withdrawals to a Roth IRA. The process can be quite complicated, so you need to make sure that you do this right and get with your HR and the 401k brokerage company to make sure that they have a process in place. Step 9 of the FIRE checklist is to build generational wealth. And you can arguably put steps 8 and 9 together, but I wanted to separate them for several reasons. When you're in this step, you're most likely very close to the financial independence stage. And what my wife and I are building now can be passed down from our generation to the next generation. Generational wealth can be our cash, investment funds, properties, and businesses. We want to create a legacy that my previous generations couldn't do in the past. You should have a conversation with your spouse to create an estate planning in case one of you passes away, and it's extremely important to have a last will and testament set up for each of you regardless of your age, so the survivor knows what to do in case of an unexpected death. If you're a high net worth individual, you should consider forming a trust to have more control of your assets in the event of your death. You should designate beneficiaries for every bank account, investment account, and any properties that you have under your name. The last thing you want to do is for your family to fight over properties in probate after you pass away. And there will also be challenges if you blindly pass your wealth to your kids and grandkids. You should help your kids invest in financial education. And teaching your kids about personal finances is a form of building generational wealth. And you wouldn't want your children to receive millions of dollars in inheritance when they don't have a single clue about how the stock market works, right? You wouldn't want to pass down your business to your kids if they don't know anything about how your business operates, right? I would encourage you to have a conversation at least once a year about your estate planning, so your beneficiaries are aware of your wishes. And lastly, be generous and give back to your community. And I want to be generous by giving my time to volunteer in the community. I want to be generous by paying for someone else's food in the drive-thru. I want to be generous by paying for someone's groceries in the grocery store. I want to tip $1,000 and more to a restaurant worker and expect nothing in return or recognition. And it gives us a sense of value and purpose instead of hoarding our wealth to ourselves, right? I've struggled financially in the past, and I want to be able to help others who may be in the same struggles I had. And I want you to ask yourself, how do you want to be generous when you have the extra income? And you don't have to wait until step 9 of the checklist to be generous, but you should wait until you're at least debt-free and have a fully funded emergency fund. And step 10 of the FIRE checklist is to pay off the mortgage. Now, we have the traditional argument of whether you should pay off your mortgage or invest. It's ultimately a personal decision and up to your risk tolerance. Having a mortgage on your home is different from having a personal loan, student loan, or credit card debt because your home is an appreciating asset. And the math tells me investing instead of paying off my mortgage early makes more sense. However, if my wife and I are close to our retirement age and we would like to be more risk averse by paying off our mortgage early, there's nothing wrong with that. And since we're in our mid-30s, we wanted to focus on investing so we'll have enough to pay off our mortgage at any time. We would also put interest rates into our consideration. We refinanced our current home to a 2.9% interest rate, and I'm not sure we'll see that ever again in our lifetime. If our interest rate was above 6%, then we would most likely pay off our mortgage as early as possible. And we will also like to pay off our mortgage when we're in our 50s to be more risk averse. We also don't want to tie up too much liquidity in real estate, and this is why I prioritize investments from steps 6 to 9 of the FIRE checklist. And we want to make sure we have our emergency fund, retirement fund, and other taxable investment accounts invested so that we don't tie up the majority of our net worth in real estate. When we're truly ready to retire early, we want to make sure it makes sense to us to pay off our mortgage early by either making additional mortgage payments or cashing out some investments to pay off the mortgage in full. Either way, it's not an easy question to answer because it depends on your financial situation. So those are the 10 steps of financial independence that my wife and I are following to retire early. Let me know in the comment section down below if you have any feedback on the checklist. And if you want to know more about how to invest for your early retirement, you should check out these 2 videos. So with that said, I appreciate you watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a good one.